Welcome to DM Tales. Before we dive into the story, please subscribe. No one in Yumuojil could later agree on when the night began to feel wrong. Some said it was when the wind stopped breathing. Others insisted it was when the insects went silent, one by one, as if something unseen had passed among them, pressing a finger to their tiny mouths. But the oldest woman in the village, Mama Ezin, would later swear it began earlier still, when the moon hesitated before climbing into the sky, as though even it feared what it would soon witness. Yumuojil was not a large village. It rested in a shallow valley, protected by thick forest on three sides and a slow, brown river to the east. By day, it was ordinary, children chasing goats, women pounding yam, men returning from farms with sweat-darkened backs. But by night, the village belonged to shadows and stories. Stories were the true fences of Yumuojil. Children learned early which paths not to walk after sunset, which trees listened, which names should never be spoken aloud once darkness had settled. These rules were not written, but they were obeyed, because those who ignored them had a way of not returning. That night, lamps were lit earlier than usual. Palm oil flames flickered nervously, stretching shadows along mud walls until they no longer looked like shadows at all, but tall, crooked figures bending close to listen. Dogs circled and whimpered, refusing to lie down. A baby screamed until its mother pressed it tightly to her chest, whispering prayers that felt suddenly thin. Then the moon rose. It was not the soft silver moon Yumuojil knew. This one was swollen and red, hanging low in the sky like a wound that had not healed. Its light stained the roofs and paths, turning everything the color of old blood. Somewhere, a calabash shattered. No one laughed. In a small hut near the western edge of the village, Kalechi lay awake on his raffia mat. He had not intended to. Sleep had simply refused him, sliding away each time he reached for it. His chest felt tight, as though the air itself had grown heavier. Kalechi was a hunter, young, strong, respected. At 26, he had already brought down a forest boar alone, something men twice his age spoke of in lowered voices. But that night, his strength felt far away, like a thing he had borrowed and returned. He sat up slowly. The silence pressed against his ears. "Kalechi," his mother murmured from the other side of the hut, half asleep. "Why are you moving like someone is calling you?" He did not answer, because he did not know how. At the far edge of Yumuojil stood a shrine that no one cleaned anymore. It was older than the oldest elder, older than names. Vines wrapped around its clay walls like fingers tightening with age. Inside it rested the drum. Children were forbidden to point at it. Adults avoided even glancing in its direction. When asked why, elders said only, "Some things sleep better when ignored." The drum had no name anyone dared speak. It was said to be carved from a tree that screamed when it fell. Its skin was stretched not just with hide, but with promises, oaths whispered in fear and sealed with blood long dried and forgotten. No one had touched it in 50 years. Then, just before midnight, the earth breathed. The sound was not loud. It did not crash or boom. It rolled outward slowly, like something massive turning over beneath the soil. Boom. One beat. Oil lamps flickered violently. A chicken dropped dead from its perch. Across Yumuojil, people sat upright at the exact same moment, hands clutching chests, breaths trapped halfway in. In his hut, Kalechi froze. The sound did not enter through his ears. It entered through his bones. And then, between the fading echo and the terrible silence that followed, he heard it. Not spoken, not shouted, whispered. "Kalechi," his blood turned cold. Outside, someone screamed. Dawn did not come gently to Yumuojil. It arrived like an intruder, pale, unwelcome, and uncertain, slipping through cracks in the darkness rather than pushing it away. The red moon faded slowly, reluctantly, as though it wished to remain and watch what would follow. When the first rooster crowed, its voice cracked halfway through, and it did not crow again. People stepped out of their huts quietly. No greetings were exchanged. Usually, mourning in Umuojil carried sound. Women calling to one another, children laughing, pestles striking mortar in steady rhythm. But this morning, voices felt dangerous, as if speaking too loudly might wake something that had only closed one eye. At the center of the village stood the Irako tree. It was ancient, older than Umuojil itself, some said. Its roots twisted above the soil like knotted muscles, thick and stubborn, gripping the earth as if holding it together. This was where judgments were made, where confessions were heard, where the past was allowed to speak. The elders gathered there without being summoned. No gong was struck. No messenger was sent. They came because they knew they must. Mama Ezen arrived last. She leaned heavily on her carved staff, her back bent, but her eyes sharp, too sharp for a woman who had seen nearly 90 rainy seasons. When she sat, the murmuring stopped. "The drum has spoken," she said, not raising her voice. "So now, we must remember." No one argued, because everyone had heard it. One elder, Okari, broad-shouldered and newly appointed, cleared his throat. "It could have been thunder," he said weakly, "or earth movement." Mama Ezen turned her gaze on him. "Did thunder call your name?" she asked. Okari lowered his eyes. The air beneath the Irako tree felt heavy, as if filled with invisible dust. Finally, the oldest man among them, Elder Nwafer, spoke. "We must see the shrine." A ripple passed through the group. Men shifted uncomfortably. That shrine had not been opened since before most of them were born. Some had never even stood close to it. But no one refused. They sent 4 young men, strong, unmarried, unmarked by titles, to go and look. The elders remained beneath the Irako tree, listening to the wind move through leaves like whispered warnings. The walk to the shrine was short, but it felt longer. The shrine squatted at the edge of the forest, half swallowed by vines and shadow. In daylight, it looked smaller than memory, less terrifying, almost pitiful. Almost. One of the young men pushed the wooden door aside. The smell hit them first. Not rot. Not decay. Something metallic. Inside, dust motes floated in narrow beams of light. Cobwebs trembled though no breeze entered. And there, at the center, sat the drum. It looked different. Closer. As if it had shifted toward the door on its own. One of the young men gagged. Another stepped back sharply. The drum's skin glistened. Wet. Fresh. They did not touch it. They ran. When they returned to the elders, their faces had lost all color. One of them vomited into the dirt before he could speak. "The drum is wet," he said finally. Like it was fed. A cry rose from somewhere in the village. A woman had begun to wail. Mama Ezen closed her eyes. "Then the debt has reopened." That night, the drum beat again. Twice. This time, the sound rolled across Umuojil like a command. Lamps shattered. Goats broke free of their tethers. And then came the whispers, clearer now, crueler. 3 names. By morning, 3 huts stood open. Their owners were gone. No blood. No struggle. Only silence, and a trail of dead leaves leading toward the forest, as if something had been dragged away by the earth itself. At the edge of the village, Kalechi stood very still, his hunting bag slung across his shoulder. His father's voice echoed in his memory, calm and afraid all at once. "If the drum ever calls you, do not hide." Hiding makes it angry. Kalechi stepped toward the forest. The forest did not welcome those who entered it. By late afternoon, the elders had gathered the men of Umuojil in order to search. Torches were lit despite the sun still hanging low, their flames already trembling as if they sensed night coming early. No one asked why they needed fire in daylight. Everyone understood. The trail of dead leaves began just beyond the last hut. They were not scattered the way harmattan winds scattered things. They lay pressed flat into the earth, crushed and browned, forming a narrow path that slipped between trees. Here and there, the ground dipped as if something heavy had been dragged, then lifted, then dragged again. No footprints accompanied it. That frightened the men most of all. They moved in silence, stepping carefully, listening. The forest canopy thickened above them, blocking out light until the world dimmed to green shadow. Birds fled as they passed. Insects crawled deeper into bark and soil. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. After a while, one man whispered, "We should turn back." No one answered him. They reached a clearing where the trees leaned inward, their roots rising from the soil like ribs. At the center lay the first sign that stopped them cold. A calabash. It belonged to Amara, one of the missing women. Everyone recognized the carved pattern along its rim. It lay split neatly in two, not shattered. Opened, like something had examined it and discarded it. A low sound escaped someone's throat. They did not go farther. When the men returned to Yumiojiel, they carried nothing but fear on their faces. Mothers clutched children tighter. Wives pressed hands to mouths to stop themselves from screaming. The elders exchanged looks they had hoped never to share again. That night, no one slept. Kalechi sat outside his hut, sharpening his knife though it needed no sharpening. His movements were slow, deliberate, something to anchor his hands. Each scrape of metal against stone sounded too loud in the stillness. Mama Ezen approached him quietly. "You heard your name," she said. It was not a question. Kalechi did not look up. "Yes." She studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Your father heard it too, once." That made his hands still. "He never spoke of it," Kalechi said. "He was wise," she replied. "Some truths grow teeth when spoken aloud." The sun sank. The sky bruised purple, then black. Torches were lit across the village, forming a loose circle of flame, a human attempt at a boundary. Then boom. The drum beat again. Not once. Not twice. 3 times. Each beat struck deeper than the last, vibrating through bone and memory. People cried out as whispers followed, slithering through the air like smoke, brushing ears, slipping into thoughts. This time, the drum did not call names immediately. It waited. Shadows began to stretch unnaturally long, crawling along the ground, climbing walls where no light touched. One shadow peeled away from its owner and lingered, as if unsure whether to return. A child screamed and fainted. Then the names came, slowly, deliberately, spoken as if tasted first. Someone collapsed. Someone else ran. The elders shouted for calm, but their voices shook. Mama Ezen dropped to her knees, pressing her forehead into the dirt. "The drum knows," she whispered. It always knew. At the shrine, the drum's surface gleamed in the firelight. Fresh markings, lines and symbols no one remembered carving, crept along its wooden body, forming shapes that made the eyes ache if stared at too long. The past was no longer buried. It was writing itself back into the present. Kalechi stood at the edge of the crowd, heart pounding, understanding settling over him like a weight. The drum was not angry for being forgotten. It was angry for being lied to. He tightened the strap of his hunting bag. The forest awaited him. Kalechi did not tell anyone he was leaving. Words felt too weak for what pressed against his chest. To speak would be to invite fear to follow him, to cling like a second shadow. So he moved quietly, slipping between huts as if the village itself were holding its breath for him. Behind him, Yumiojiel burned with torchlight. Ahead of him, the forest swallowed light whole. He paused only once, at his mother's doorway. Inside, she slept fitfully, murmuring his name the way women do when they sense a thread pulling away from their lives. He wanted to wake her, to explain, to promise he would return. But the drum had already taken his promise. So he turned away. The forest greeted him with cold. Mist clung low to the ground, coiling around his ankles, damp and heavy. Each step seemed to sink slightly deeper than the last, as if the earth were softening beneath him, learning his weight. Leaves crunched too loudly underfoot, then suddenly not at all, as though sound itself had decided to hide. Kalechi felt watched. Not from one direction. From all of them. His torch flickered. Shadows leaped across tree trunks, stretching into shapes that did not hold still long enough to be named. He tightened his grip on his knife, not because he believed it would save him, but because empty hands felt like surrender. Then the forest changed. The air thickened. The path he followed narrowed, trees bending inward until their branches brushed his shoulders like fingers testing warmth. The mist brightened faintly, glowing from within, and he realized with a jolt that it was not reflecting moonlight. It was lit. He stopped. Something stood ahead. At first, it looked like a man, tall, still pale. Then it shifted, and the illusion fell apart. Its edges wavered, blurring into the mist, reforming again. Its face was smooth and hollow, as if features had been erased. Where eyes should have been were two dark, round openings. Like drum mouths. Kelechi's breath caught. The thing spoke, and the sound did not travel through the air. It bloomed inside his skull, layered and deep, voices overlapping voices, old and tired and hungry. You walk because you were called. Kelechi swallowed. I came to listen. A pause. Then a low sound, almost laughter. You wear our blood, the spirit said. The village fed us lies. Now we eat names. Images flooded Kelechi's mind, unasked for, unstoppable. Strangers arriving long ago, weary from travel. Promises of shelter. Bowls of food. Smiles that had sharpened intent. Nighttime drums. Screams swallowed by forest roots. Blood seeping into soil. Names carved, then erased. The drum, new then, glowing with fresh power. Kelechi dropped to his knees, gasping. Why now? The lie has grown old, the spirit replied. It cracked. And when lies crack, truth leaks. The mist thickened, wrapping around him like a shroud. Someone must remember, the spirit said softly. Or everyone will. The image shattered. Kelechi found himself alone again, the forest silent, unchanged, except that the path behind him was gone. Back in Yumuogil, the drum beat once more. Not loud, not fast. A reminder. The elders felt it in their bones. The forest had accepted its witness. The forest did not end where Kelechi thought it should. He walked for what felt like hours, yet the ground beneath his feet never changed. The same twisted roots rose from the soil. The same trees leaned inward, their bark scarred with marks that looked disturbingly like old fingernails. Even the air tasted the same, damp, metallic, alive. Time unraveled. Kelechi's torch burned lower, its flame shrinking until it barely pushed back the dark. Still, the mist glowed faintly, guiding him deeper as though the forest itself had chosen to keep him. Then the trees moved. Not suddenly. Not violently. They shifted the way muscles shift beneath skin. Branches bent where no wind passed. Trunks groaned softly as roots slid beneath the soil, rearranging paths, closing spaces behind him. The forest was not trapping him. It was escorting him. You wanted truth, came the layered voice again. Truth does not stay still. The pale figure appeared between two trees, clearer now. Its shape held longer, as though memory itself were giving it strength. Where its chest should have been, faint symbols pulsed, matching the markings Kelechi had glimpsed on the drum. What are you? Kelechi asked, his voice hoarse. We are what was buried alive, it answered, and what learned to breathe underground. The forest opened into a clearing Kelechi had never seen before, yet somehow recognized. The earth here was darker, richer, fed by something more than rain. Stones stood upright in a loose circle, each carved with names worn smooth by time. Some of the names felt familiar. Too familiar. Kelechi staggered forward, dread pooling in his stomach. These are ours. Yes, the spirit said. But they were not always yours. The ground trembled. From the soil rose shadows, dozens of them, stretching upward like smoke shaped into human form. Their faces were blank, unfinished, yet their posture radiated accusation. They were welcomed. The spirit continued. Federal promised safety, then offered. The shadows leaned closer. Why protect us? Kelechi demanded. Why bind this to blood? Because blood remembers, came the reply. And because your elders asked us to. The clearing dissolved. Kalechi saw it now, not as vision, but as lived memory. Elders long dead, kneeling around the drum. Strangers bound, confused, pleading in tongues long forgotten. The drum struck again and again, louder each time, until the forest itself bowed. Power flooded the village then, harvests thrived, sickness faded, enemies turned away. But the cost did not disappear. It waited. Kalechi screamed, the sound tearing free as the truth settled into him like a curse. You made monsters, he whispered, and called it protection. The spirit stepped closer, its hollow eyes endless. No, it said gently. You fed them, and forgot them. The forest shuddered. Far away, in Umuojil, shadows lifted themselves from the ground and began to walk. The first thing Umuojil lost was sound. Crickets vanished mid-song. Frogs fell silent by the riverbank. Even the wind, which had worried the palm leaves all evening, withdrew as if it had been warned away. What remained was a silence so deep it pressed against the ears, making people swallow hard just to feel alive. Then the lamps began to fail. One by one, flames guttered and died, not blown out, not starved of oil, but smothered, as though unseen hands had closed gently over them. Darkness spread in uneven patches, pooling in corners, slipping beneath doorways. The drum beat. Once. The ground shivered. Pots rattled. A woman cried out as her shadow stretched away from her feet, lengthening across the wall until it no longer resembled her shape. At the Irako tree, the elders stood together, torches raised high. Firelight carved deep lines into their faces, revealing fear that years of authority had never fully erased. It has crossed the forest, Elder Nwafer whispered. Hasn't it? Mama Ezen did not answer at first. She was staring at the ground, at her own shadow, how it trembled, how it lagged half a breath behind her movements. Yes, she said finally. The dead has come home. Another beat. Boom. This one was louder. Heavier. It carried something with it. A pressure in the chest, a tightening in the throat. People dropped to their knees as whispers brushed past them, searching, testing. Names hovered on the edge of hearing. A man ran. He burst from his hut, eyes wide, breath ragged, clutching a charm to his chest. I did nothing, he shouted. I did nothing. His shadow peeled away from him. It rose, tall and thin, featureless except for the shape of a mouth that slowly opened. The man screamed as the shadow leaned close. Not touching, not dragging, just listening. When it sank back into the earth, the man collapsed, shaking, alive but emptied, as if something essential had been taken and weighed elsewhere. Panic spread. Doors were barred. Children were dragged under beds. Prayers collided in the air, spoken to different spirits, different gods, none certain who still listened. At the shrine, the drum glowed. New symbols burned faintly along its body, carving themselves into the wood with a soft, patient certainty. Each mark pulsed in time with a slow, steady rhythm that was no longer sound alone, it was command. Mama Ezen stepped forward, staff shaking in her grip. This will not stop, she said, her voice breaking but firm. Not until the truth stands in daylight. Some elders turned away. Others wept openly. You buried strangers, she continued. You fed the forest lies and called it peace. Now it asks for a living memory. Another beat. The earth split slightly at the shrine's threshold, just enough to remind them how thin the ground truly was. Far away, beyond the village, something moved toward Umuojil, not fast, not slow, but inevitable. Dawn came quietly, as if afraid to disturb what the night had decided. A pale light crept over Umuojil, touching rooftops, sliding along footpaths, revealing what darkness had hidden. The village looked smaller in daylight, older, too. Walls bore fresh cracks. Footprints circled places where no one remembered walking. At the shrine, The ground lay split like a healed wound that would never fully close. The drum was silent. That silence frightened the people more than its voice ever had. Villagers emerged slowly from their huts. Some carried children who had not slept. Others walked with the careful steps of those unsure the earth would hold. No one spoke above a whisper. At the Irreversible tree, the elders gathered again, fewer this time. One seat remained empty, though no one said whose it was meant to be. Mama Ezen stood before them, her face drawn, eyes red but clear. "It is finished," she said. "For now." Someone asked the question everyone feared. "And Kalechi?" Mama Ezen turned toward the shrine. They went together. The door stood open. Inside, the air felt cool and clean, washed of blood and smoke. The drum rested at the center, unchanged in shape, but different in presence. New carvings wrapped its body in a continuous story. Strangers welcomed, betrayed, buried, elders kneeling, a young hunter walking into the forest with his head held high. There was no body, no blood, only the truth, written where forgetting could not reach it. As the sun rose fully, a soft sound stirred the air, not a beat, not a call, a breath. The villagers felt it pass through them, gentle and steady, as if something vast had finally settled into rest. From that day on, Umuojil changed. No judgment was spoken beneath the Irreversible tree without the full story being told. No traveler was welcomed without honesty. Children were taught the names of those who had been lost, not as warnings, but as remembrance. And on rare nights, when the moon turns red and the wind dies, the villagers hear a single beat from the shrine. It does not call names. It listens, because the drum remembers what people try to forget. And now, it is never alone. Please subscribe.